area. That's the direction we understand the storm is headed. It's got a ways to go. It's clear here. There's a few.
A disaster is a natural or man-made hazard that has come to fruition, resulting in an event of substantial extent, causing significant physical damage or destruction, loss of life, or drastic changes to the environment. No country is immune, and though they may be threatened at different levels, the looming question is always when and not if. The consequences of a disaster and the vulnerabilities to which populations in the Caribbean are exposed can be mitigated through the use of information communication technologies.
That's what we see in disasters. The amount of preparation you do has a large impact on the number of lives saved.
I think that we should have the possibility of a satellite radio station.
To have it in your database, that when you talk about that shelter, about sending people to that shelter, you know you have a fair amount of knowledge whether or not the shelter is in use.
As part of the ICT series, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago held its 8th Open Forum seminar on the topic, The Use of ICTs in Disaster Preparedness and Management. This forum was held in Tobago and allowed residents and community stakeholders an opportunity to express their own individual concerns and suggestions. Mr. Chris Seacharan, Chief Executive Officer of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, gave a brief overview on the effective use of new and traditional ICT technologies in early warning systems.
There are many new communications technologies that allow responding agencies not only to reach persons at risk, but also to have warning messages adapted to particular situations. Both traditional and new media can effectively be used for disaster warning purposes. Some may be more effective than others, depending on the nature of disaster, the regions affected, and the socio-economic status of affected communities. Such ICTs are used to provide early warning systems, include radio, as broadcasting radio, telephones, both fixed telephone and mobile telephones, short messaging systems, SMS systems, the internet via so-called social networking sites like Facebook, Twitter, and so on, television, broadcasts, satellite systems, amateur and community radio, and the like.
Is it prudent to adopt a wait-and-see approach to natural disasters? Mr. Karamchand Perai shares some startling statistics on the correlation between a country's preparedness and a reduction in loss of life.
In 2004, the disaster in Sri Lanka, lives lost were about 38,000, and the damage was about $1 billion. As you go, there's another one in Pakistan, which again, loss of lives totaled to about 100,000, and the economical damage is $5 billion. On the other scale, in our hemisphere, the disaster in New Orleans and Katrina, only a total of about 1,600 to about 2,000 people died. But what's important is the economical damage caused from that disaster, which was about $25 to $100 billion. Some say in the average of $75 billion. Closer to home, the one at Haiti, it was estimated that damage was, in terms of loss of lives, about 316,000. The final estimate in terms of, the economic damage is still being looked at right now. I don't have a figure for that. But what's important, though, that if you compare what happened in the U.S. with what happened in the Asia-Pacific region, something comes out from there. The economic damage, although in the U.S. was quite large, the number of lives were quite small in comparison to the Asia-Pacific region. And there's one reason for that. Was the ability in the U.S. to prepare for the natural disaster as opposed to what sort of communication facilities and so on was used in Southeast Asia. And that's what we see in disasters. The amount of preparation you do has a large impact on the number of lives saved. This is another incidence of how ICT can be used to alert the public. And this network is called the Alert Network. And it was born out of the crisis in Rwanda in 1994. When there's need for donor agencies to come to assist, you have to recognize there are a number of donor agencies who will be willing to come to assist across there. And the information you get from a system like this is you can disseminate the information so you don't have competing agencies going to one location to provide assistance.
Over the years, emphasis was laid on the short-term components of crisis management, mainly firefighting and rescue and relief operations. The concept of management of risks as a prelude to crisis management includes the sum total of all activities, programs and measures which can be taken up before, during and after disaster. Alan Stewart, Director of Tobago Emergency Management Agency, shares an example on the active and current use of ICTs in a localized early warning system.
How do you communicate instantaneously with a population or a community that is more paradising, so to speak? Are they listening to any FM radio or any hi-fi radio? No, they are on the beach. And therefore, you still need to have systems that are able to communicate with them. Somebody talk about sirens. Sirens able to carry a message? That was established. No. You need system that can speak to the people and they could have a level of intelligence as to what this warning is all about. The community early warning system. This is a multi-hazard community early warning system. This is a shot of it in being installed, and we talk about robustness. It must be robust. It must be able to be managed in a particular way. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have two of those systems based on funds available to us by the Tobago House of Assembly, and also looking at the vulnerability or doing the type of risk assessment of your exposure. You definitely need to use the resources in a wise way. We looked at the southwestern area of Tobago, and we know that it is highly susceptible to a type of event that, if not managed in a particular way, I just told you that people that lime on Storby are not listening to any FM radio and all that kind of stuff. You go down by the bar, down in, what do you call the bar overlooking the bay, you ain't listening to no radio, you're listening to what the DJ is playing. So therefore, if I need to alert you, ladies and gentlemen, I need to tell you something by using a means whereby you could be alerted. So the community early warning system is strategically located in that particular area.
Trinidad and Tobago is a participating member of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. In keeping with its objective to encourage disaster loss reduction at a regional level, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, ODPM, is currently implementing the use of geographic information systems. Dennis Marshall of the ODPM tells us more.
Also incorporated within the last 12 months, just about 12 months, GIS systems into ODPM. What does that do for us? The GIS is primarily our vulnerability assessment tool. And actually this year, starting later this year and continuing into next year, we are going to do a vulnerability assessment across Trinidad and Tobago. What does that mean? We will be able to, well, what the exercise will do for us is to help us to map all the vulnerable communities, vulnerable persons, persons with disabilities, have that information stored on that system. If there's a particular event that's affecting or possibly would affect a particular community, we could pull up and see what is the vulnerable areas of that community. That will help us, one, with our coordination, things like evacuation planning, what resources we need to get in the community, what resources we need to get out of the community as well. In addition to that, during a particular event, the GIS also gives us the ability to do hazard mapping. For example, if there is something that would affect the Point Lisas area from our GIS system, we just pull up the map of Point Lisas, look at the area, look at the particular layers that we have in Point Lisas, and we are able to pull the chemicals that are being used in particular industries. We are able to pull the working population. We are able to pull the residents in that area. And those are the key things that we need to start our plans.
Now we seem to be basing everything ICT and just about almost everything on the word satellite. My knowledge is that there are quite a few outside there, but does Trinidad and Tobago or any country in the Caribbean own any of those satellites? So we are very, very dependent, as it were, on whoever might possibly be keeping those satellites out there in orbit.
Now, what actually happens in a disaster is that, let's for instance, there's need for communication via satellites. ITU, for instance, which is the International Telecommunications Union, the authority that sets the standards and so on, they provide the satellite phones to the various bodies within the region that's affected. And if I go back to the situations in Haiti, for instance, a number of satellite phones were actually given by the ITU to the administrations within the affected region to establish communication. So there is that facility that the satellite owners provide that would allow you this mode of communication.
If the average guy could stream more stuff up, like reports up, more people know not to go there, not to take boats, not to die. We don't only have to wait for hurricanes and tsunamis and all that. That I think we did already. So if we want to address those two things, bandwidth streaming and some more help for the general population for remote sensing.
As it stands, our role as a telecoms authority is really in the provision of spectrum that would enable or allow the kind of data streaming that you're speaking about. Of course, there are remote sensing satellites that are available. We don't have any direct relationship with the providers of those satellite services ourselves at the authority. What we would do normally, if there's an active entity in Trinidad, for example, the Environmental Management Agency, perhaps a question like that would be better posed to them, where they would be the ones who would receive the data from the remote sensing satellites and then make that information available to the general public.
My question is, I heard about the pre-ICT, the use of ICT in pre-disaster management, in post-disaster management, and during a disaster. What I did not hear is the use of ICT when it comes to collaborative effort with the response teams. So, for example, I didn't hear the ODPM as well as TEMA say, I will ask the respondents to use either Meet Me, and I'm not plugging here for TSDT or marketing any of our production services, but we have Meet Me, or online group meetings or so. I'm not hearing that. And there are times when they call us to meetings, and kudos to those who in TEMA who coordinate the disaster response teams together, but we have to leave our organizations to come to meetings. Whereas we could take advantage of the various ICT technologies, which will allow us to then sit at our various organizations and still communicate all of the things and still plan accordingly. So if you all could elaborate on it a bit, thanks.
We don't always, when we do activation, we don't always need the physical presence of the representative at our location. It is very useful, but let's face it, sometimes the time of the impact or the location of the person is not it's not possible for them to get to our location. So we do have those systems in place that we can speak to them, or even have that video conference system up and running and having our partners on board.